This is the first of two tutorials on the noise reduction and restoration effects. We're going to work with the effects that work in both the effects rack and directly on the file. To follow along, get the noises music wave file inside the working files folder, noises subfolder, and there it is. Let's take a look at those effects now. Effects, noise reduction / restoration. There are 6 effects here. Looks like there are 7, but this one on top is not an effect. It works with the noise reduction effect. There are 4 effects that work in the effects rack and also work directly on the file, and there are 2 process effects. We're going to save the process effects for the second half of this two-parter here. And the process effects really are the ones that I prefer using versus the more automated things here. But let me show you these guys, and then we'll go on to these other 2 in the next tutorial. Starting off with adaptive noise reduction, here's what it looks like. The way this effect works is that it listens for noise and then reduces it. And so you need to have enough noise outside of the part that you want to use in a file so that it can take enough time to be able to decide what the noise is. So it's important then when you record something, let's say in an auditorium or just in the studio or in a workplace, that you get room tone. You get the sound of the room that you can either add to a file at the beginning before you start actually talking. It's always good to get about 10 seconds of room tone. Doesn't need 10 seconds, but at least get a few seconds of room tone. And then it listens to the room tone or whatever sound you've got, and then it attempts to remove that from the rest of the file. So we're set up here ready to go with a file that is hiss at the beginning, like that. And we're going to see if we can remove the hiss using this adaptive approach. So I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to put it toward ahead of the hiss, and you'll see how long it takes for it to remove it. You'll hear it dip down as it finally gets it removed from the file. You heard it kind of dip off, and then now you don't hear the hiss anymore, but you also hear that the music is pretty distinctly different and not all that great. Removing hiss is not an easy thing to do. If the hiss is loud as this is, then good luck getting it out without damaging the audio. But that is the process here. It listens for a while and then it reduces it. And if I start here rather than start there, it'll listen for it, then it'll change it. Like so. Now, there are 2 controls up here that are, I think, moderately intuitive. The rest of these guys might be worth checking out by checking out the help file on this, but these 2 I'll talk about. The noisiness, I think, should be on top, because I think you want to control noisiness first. This says what percentage of all the frequencies that it finds or that it determines to be noise do you want to reduce? And then how much do you want to reduce those selected frequencies by? How many decibels you want to drop it down? So you can adjust these guys to fine-tune how this effect works. Let's try it again. I'll make some adjustments here. You'll just hear what the dramatic difference can be here as I move these around. So we can get rid of all the hiss, no doubt about it, but when you do that, you're getting rid of a lot of other frequencies as well. But I think you get a sense of how it works. Adaptive noise reduction. I prefer the noise reduction effect, which is not quite so automated, so we'll go to that one in the next tutorial. We'll drop out of this now, turn that guy off, and go to the automatic click remover. An effect that I think is still in search of a purpose, because I have not been able to get this guy to work. Before we go any further, let me show you that it is very much like another effect. To see that one, we go to Effects and go to Diagnostics. We'll go to declicker. Notice it says Process after it. The declicker is a process effect. It applies its effect directly to a file and changes that file. It's destructive editing. Whereas the rack effect version, the automatic click remover, is a rack effect, and when you use it as a rack effect, it can be played in real time. You make adjustments to it. You can come back to it later and make further adjustments to it. Only when you apply it does it actually go onto the clip and do that destructive part of the editing. So it's advantageous to have the automatic click remover working in the effects rack versus the diagnostics, but the diagnostics works very much like it. And with diagnostics, you run a scan of the file, and you can see in the scan exactly where all the clicks are. At least it has determined that it believes clicks are present there. But in any event, I think that the automatic click remover just doesn't work that well. Let me just try it out here. The deal is, the lower the number for the threshold, the harder it looks to find clicks. So I'm going to lower the number to really make it aggressive. And the higher the complexity, the more frequencies it tries to remove. And that can remove frequencies that you don't want to remove. But I'm really going to make an aggressive crack at it here. We're going to examine this thing, which has some clicks in it. has some record vinyl noise, and this next one has a couple of like finger pops. We'll see how it works. Not very effective there. Let's try this one. Here's that little click. Another click. Both of them still there. It didn't remove them. So, how effective is it? I think relatively ineffective. What I prefer doing is a more manual approach. I first remove any noise like this vinyl noise, and then the clicks are a little more prominent. You can see them better inside the spectral frequency display, and then I manually remove the clicks. I think it's a more effective approach to it. It is kind of tedious, but I think it's a better way to do it. If there are lots and lots of clicks, then maybe I throw in the towel and try the automatic one. But for the most part, I go on the manual search for clicks rather than the automatic search. Let's close this guy down. Move to the automatic phase correction. Phase is a kind of qualitative thing. I mean, there's a technical side to it, certainly, but for you to know whether something is out of phase, you can analyze it. And I'm going to show you how to analyze things for phase in the next series of tutorials following this one. But for the most part, listen for phase issues. And to listen for phase issues, you have to have a stereo signal and hear it in a large space so you can walk around. As you walk around, you might hear sudden dips in the volume. Something sounds missing someplace. If that happens, that's probably because something is out of phase. And if that's the case, you can bring it over to the automatic phase correction. Why things are out of phase? Typically, you might have mics placed improperly, or you might have tape heads that are not aligned if you still work with tapes as opposed to only digital audio. Other phase issues that may come up when you're walking around, you may have centered an instrument, and suddenly it's coming out of only one channel, left or right. So if you know it's supposed to be in the center, but you hear it only out of one channel, then you know something is out of phase. In that case, though, come over here and use the automatic phase correction tool. Make sure auto align channels is turned on, and just run it. Just put on a file and apply it down here, and that should fix it. If it doesn't fix it, then you got to kind of lay into some of these more technical stuff, and I expect you will go to the help file to learn more about it. Let's move on to the dehummer. And I'm thinking this dehummer reminds me of another effect. Does it remind you of another effect? You go to Effects, Filter, and EQ, and lo and behold, there's the notch filter. And look at that. Looks an awful lot like the dehummer. In fact, I would say that it is the dehummer. There are some subtle differences between the two, and my choice is to work with the notch filter. Let me just show you the difference. The notch filter has 6 possibilities. You can have 6 things that you can create notches for, which you're removing the frequency there. And you can control the width of the frequency you're removing. The tighter it is, the fewer frequencies outside the one you selected will be removed. The control of the width is not all that exacting. You've got narrow, very narrow, or super narrow. Not a numeric selection and not very detailed. That's the one little drawback to the notch filter versus the dehummer. The dehummer, though, you can select only one frequency. So these guys are both selecting 60 hertz as the default because you use these a lot when you have electric hum. And in North America, the electric hum is at 60 hertz. And then we have a hum, you've got harmonics, and so it's good to remove not only the hum, but its harmonics. So that's what this guy's doing. There's the hum at 60, and then it's removing the harmonics along the way there. But the difference is that here, you don't have much choice over how wide this little range is. Here you have very specific choice called Q. And you can adjust the Q wider or narrower. The bigger the number, the narrower it is. The smaller the number, the wider it is. And there's the Q at work there, as you see here graphically. The other thing is, here you can specify not only a frequency for a starting point, but you can pick any frequency for these guys. Over here, you pick a starting point, and then you can only pick harmonics, which is, probably the way you would use a hum remover anyways, but here you are stuck only with harmonics. Or you may view it as conveniently, it picks all the harmonics for you. So, it depends on how you look at it. And you have the control over the Q here as well. The slope here determines, how many decibels you remove. The default is 50, which actually, even though it's like an angled line, it actually removes things more or less equally as you go up in frequency. Over here, you can control how much you remove manually from each harmonic or whatever notch you select. So in the end, it's kind of like a coin toss, but I tend to lean toward the notch filter when I'm removing a particular hum or some kind of a thing where it's in a very narrow frequency band. So those are the 4 noise reduction and restoration effects that work in both the effects rack and directly onto the file. I'll cover the 2 noise reduction and restoration process effects in the next tutorial.